My name is Ann Erin. I am the founding chairperson of IMCCA, who's the sponsor of this event. I'll tell you about that in a minute. I'm going to be presenting and moderating today, and our topic is AV and IT in 2017, what's still not working in a post-convergence world. So if you're not in the right room, you can leave now. Let me tell you about what IMCCA is. We're the nonprofit industry association for conferencing, collaboration, and unified communications. It is free for you who are end users to join. We have a booth on the show floor, number 2969. Vendors join for a nominal fee. And our whole purpose really is to form industry alliances. We are a partner with Infocom to provide networking opportunities. We have a newsletter for speaking and educational opportunities and for special interest groups. We've been around since 1998, and we have recently gone more global than before. I have two of our board members here, Danny Rogers, who's in the UK and running all of this for us overseas, and Michael Goldman, who's here in the US and is part of our board as well. So if you have questions, you can see the three of us, or you are welcome to go to the show floor and look for Carol Zelkin, who's our executive director. Who am I? I'm the founding chairperson of IMCCA. I currently chair all the program. Oh, I have to do a thank you to David Danto this year. I traveled around the world in the month of January, which is when all the program needed to be in, so I skated a bit this year. And David filled in for getting a lot of the program together. He's also a board member. I'm also president of a 35-year-old management consulting firm. I've been doing this a very long time. You are allowed to call me the industry godmother. You are not allowed to call me the industry grandmother. And my contact details are below. We will be around for a few minutes after the end of the session, or you can find us online or down at the show floor. So let's sort of set the stage here for AV and IT convergence. It's no longer a conversation about how AV teams need to understand basic networking. We've gone past that. However, I will tell you, I do still have end user customers who are not completely converged, who still have the silos of facilities, AV, and IT. And there still is a fair amount of infighting in many organizations as to who's going to win out and who's in charge. That has to stop. The technology is becoming more network-centric. I think that's going to eventually go away, but I think it's an evolutionary process, not a revolutionary process. Part of the reason that it's got to go away is what's shown here. AV projects, large AV projects may be 50 rooms. Large IT projects could be 50,000 seats or rooms. So it's a scalability issue, if nothing else. In addition to that, the way we work has changed. It's become a very virtual world out there. In fact, let me ask you, how many in here consider yourself end users from end user organizations? Raise your hands. And how many of you are from the vendor, integrator, VAR community? So we actually have a room full more heavy end users than we do the other. And that's nice to see. So what we're finding, and let me ask you end users, how many of you are education? How many of you are corporate? So that's about 50-50. How many of you are government? 2. Okay. All right, so we've got roughly 48 corporate education and 2 of you from government. So what we're finding is remote working is becoming the norm. And in many ways, the firm you can thank for all of this is Apple. The minute they came out with iPhones and iPads, and people could go anywhere and actually connect anywhere, the rules changed drastically. I no longer had to be at real estate at my desk to work. So as a result, it's caused a change in the way we meet, and for those of you who are on the technology side, in some ways I feel sorry for you, because there's always somebody coming into you with a new app, a new device that they want connected to your network for you to be able to work. And I know what that does to you. So what do end users now say about traditional boardroom AV systems? That's the CXX's room. And we do a lot of needs assessments where we go in and talk to actual users. And we've gone into organizations where they have lots of rooms, but the users don't know they have lots of rooms. Or the users will say to us, yes, we have a room on that floor, but that's for the C-level person. I would never go in there. They'll also tell you that we only use those big rooms for big meetings. We get this with all the gear. I'm afraid to use the gear. Now, I will tell you historically, 20% of the people will never use the gear. They won't touch it, and if they do, they break it. 20% of the users will use the gear, and their goal is to break it. They tend to be more geeky. They want to see if they can make the thing not work. It's that 60% in the middle that we're really after. We want to get them comfortable so the gear becomes second nature to them, and they no longer think about the gear. And that should be your target audience for these technologies. Nobody uses the AV system. Sometimes that's true. I wouldn't dare use the system without an AV or IT person in the room to make sure it works. And I heard that yesterday. I did the Emerging Trends Day yesterday, and we had one of the speakers who said, you know, our people expect we're going to be there for every meeting. We can't do that anymore as this has scaled. You can't possibly, even with roller skates, get to every room you need to on time. So we need to focus more on how we remotely manage these technologies and not do them by holding the hands of users. And we need to get to the point where the users don't look at the technology as a technology. It's just another tool they're using, and they really don't need training. Nobody trained them on the iPhone, on the iPad. Why should they train them on these things? So the vast majority of organizations today, these big rooms are empty often, unless the boss is using them, or they need an upgrade of technology, and people are looking for spaces to hold small person meetings, 3 to 5 in a meeting. The rooms we now use for work have changed. Smaller, simpler, drop-in technologies are replacing the complex integrated systems. Now, I have a number of clients who have very large rooms and are starting to put in what they call huddle or team rooms, but they don't all necessarily know how to do that effectively. And what I mean about that is that we still have to worry about acoustics, lighting, HVAC in some of these environments. We still have to worry about the people who are putting all these glass rooms in and glass top tables in. So we've got to get a little bit more realistic with the architectural entities of the world as to how technology and the physics of technology works. That's something you all need to be very well aware of. We have new modern solutions to meet almost all needs, from small all the way up to custom. Another problem we're facing is nearly all modern AV components are now IT network reliant. So that forces us to learn not only the AV side, but the IT side, and reverse. I know a lot of IT people who don't know AV, and yet they like to think they do, because isn't that like the device I have at home? All I do is switch it on, plug it in, and I'm done? No, it's not like the device you have at home. So we've got to get to the point where we respect each other. The other issue we've got, and we see this more and more in the news, is that these multi-component networked AV systems have multiple security holes in them. We hear all the good ones on the news, but we miss a lot of them. I had a chief legal counsel of a major corporation say in a meeting, anytime from now on we're discussing anything sensitive, we are going outside on the lawn. And he was serious. He was concerned that there was going to be a breach of security in all these devices, and there were certain topics he was no longer willing to discuss in a conference room. And typically these integrated systems have 20 components or more with them, so there's a lot of potential vulnerability. Another one I've heard a lot of my clients say is that they get their own systems really secure, but then they let the tech from outside or the visitor come in with their own laptop and plug into the network without worrying about security. And there have been breaches done that way. Another problem, nearly all modern AV component, whoops, wrong way. I was going to say that looked familiar. Team chat applications are gaining ground. If any of you were in the Emerging Trends session yesterday, we had one speaker that talked nothing but these team chat. And when I now go in and talk to end user organizations about what technologies are you using, this is becoming a big question. We can't just ask, what do you use for audio, what do you use for data, what do you use for video, how are you meeting? We have to talk to them about the apps they're using. And when I talk to the actual end users, I find that most organizations are using 7 or more different apps within the same organization. Why? Because the teams may be dealing with customers, suppliers, or partners elsewhere who are using something different. They're often free or very inexpensive to get. So the users themselves are downloading or loading these apps, and the IT AV department knows nothing about it till they walk in and see that it's being used. So you're going to have to address how you're going to manage these, or what you can do is say to your users, we will support X, Y, and Z. Anything else you bring in is that you're on your own. Team chat applications may further require IT-centric room systems. So it would be nice to be able to have a single collaboration experience from my room, my desktop, to my pocket. There are some organizations who've now thrown the baby out with the bathwater. And what they've basically done is saying, okay, we've amortized all of our technology. We're going to get rid of it all. We're going to have one platform come in. We're going to support it across the board. And if you're going to work in this organization, you need to know that platform. Pretty drastic step, but they said it really makes it a lot easier to be able to use the technology. So here are some of the important questions we need to ask today, and I have a few other for our panelists. Why are AV consulting firms and integrators still suggesting and creating custom rooms with multi-points of failure if simpler, excellent solutions exist? Part of that answer is because the user asks for them, and we don't know enough to tell them no. How can organizations identify the good systems and reject the bad ones? I think you need to do two things. I think you need to talk to your vendors and say to them, where else have you installed this, and whom can I talk to about it? I also think you need to talk to your vendors and say, I want 3 references, and I think you need to call the references. We do a lot of RFPs, and it's amazing to me the number of companies that don't call the references that have been provided to them. Their answer is, oh, that's a big enough company, I know they've done this elsewhere, I don't need to call the references. Yes, you do. Because although a lot of these companies are big companies, they may not have done exactly what you're trying to accomplish. So take the time to do your homework. How do we put a stop to the practice of AV professionals specifying the same type of solution they did on the last job? How do AV firms adapt to new IT team chat applications? The first one is a problem only because they don't have enough hours in the day to get everything done. And so what you have to do is really look carefully at the proposal they're giving you to make sure it's meeting your specific needs. And I would say you start by identifying what your needs truly are. And that's often a missed space. I said to the people yesterday, you really need to talk to your users before you start worrying about the technology. And you need to say to them, not what technology would you like, but tell me how you work. What tools are you using to work? Whom are you working with? Are they internal or external? And what things frustrate you? They can all answer those questions. What they can't answer is what type of video conferencing would you like? What type of room would you like? They don't know the answer. They're not educated enough on it. They haven't had enough experience in many cases to know what's the best and what works for them. But you really need to find out from them what solution they want. And I had an example recently where we went in to do an assessment and I walked into a chemical engineer who said to me, I know you're here to talk about video. And I said, well, actually, no. We're here to talk about all technologies. He said, oh, good. He said, I don't want to use video. He said, I want one of those whiteboards that I can write on and they can see it at the other site. Pretty easy solution to give him, but nobody bothered to ask him. He said, I don't need to see the people I'm working with. I know what they look like. I need to see the chemical that we're modeling on the board. He said, what I'm doing now is taking my phone and taking a picture of it. Or we have to erase it part way, we have to stop, take a picture, then we do more and we take another picture. He doesn't have to do that. I had another client who said to me, I know you're here to talk about video, and that always seems to be the buzzword because it's glitzy. And they said, you see that thing on the table? And I said, yes, that's a speakerphone. Well, it doesn't work. So we take our cell phone out, we open our cell phone out, we put it on the middle of that speakerphone and we dial the number we want. Well, first of all, they had audio through the video system that nobody told them about. And secondly, a cell phone in a room is horrendous. It cost us $249 to replace the speakerphone in the middle of that room. We had a supporter for life because we solved her problem. Nobody bothered to ask her what the problem was. And then lastly, the security nightmare that's coming. Now that AV components ride the network, can we get the manufacturers to adopt a standard for operating systems, ports, and protocols? Remember, this is an evolutionary process, not a revolutionary process. So that set is our goal for what we're going to accomplish today. Let me tell you a little bit about our panelists who are going to address these. And I'll do them in this order so you know who they are. We have Netta Lempert, who is here from Kramer. Next we have Dave Buchholz, who's here from Intel. Michael Goldman, who's here from Crestron. Danny Rogers, who's here from AVI, SPL. And Mark Strassman, who's here from Blue Jeans. So you've got a pretty illustrious panel here today. I'm going to, well, we do have a mic now. Oh good, I don't have to. I'm going to sort of pose a few questions to them to sort of set the stage. Then we're going to open it up to you. And I will walk around the room and hand out the microphone so that everybody can hear it. So let me just start with all of you by asking you what you think the difference is between AV and IT, and where are we going with this? One, all. Okay. And you'll have to pull the mics.
Well, I think traditionally, if we go back to what you're talking about, having the silos, they see them as completely different. Most customers I'm dealing with today, there is really not a difference between AV and IT. It's just really a set of requirements inside your corporation to deliver a solution stack. So in IT terms, you're looking for what pieces of architecture I need to deliver in. It's not just about SQL servers and these other things anymore. It's really about delivering, video conferencing, collaboration. And it's not just turning on a projector in a room anymore. It's really fostering the next generation of collaboration inside your companies, right? So how do you do that? What are the requirements around it? But at the base of it, it's really identifying the experience people are asking for. I go into deal with a lot of companies and people have a preset idea around technology. And the problem is, IT people, solution providers, everybody deals with technology, but when you talk to customers, they deal in experience. And that's one of the biggest problems I run into all the time is the customers have an expectation around experience. The people who provide the requirements, they're always coming with experience, but the people who provide solutions come into it from a technology angle. And it's very important to have that discussion with people right away, is talk about the experience. The greatest example, you gave the examples up there, I go out and I deal with folks from our organization and I say, hey, you've been in Intel for 2 years. What's the difference? What do you see that we need to do when you're talking a collaboration environment? Best example they gave me, how many people in here have either implemented one of these rooms or been in one of these rooms where you walk in and you got 3 laminated sheets of paper on the table to tell you exactly how to use the room? Raise your hands. How many of those same people go and buy something to use at home from Best Buy, take it out of the box, plug it in, if it doesn't work, you take it back because you don't read the manual? Raise your hands. Right? And literally I had somebody tell me, I don't read manuals when I hook technology at home. Why do you expect me to read a manual to use a room? Right? It's very important, that part of the experience, that you deliver technology that meets their experience expectation. You can give them the best technology in the world and spend twice the amount of money you need to spend. But if the experience sucks, they're not going to use it. So that merger of AV and IT is as much about experience as it is about technology.
Anybody else care to comment? Mike.
Sure. So 4 words come to mind: experience, reliability, resilience, and scale. And to me, those are the big difference, right? It's not, does the widget have a LAN port on it? But there's a feeling and a comfort that when I'm issued a device from my IT department, my phone will work, my email will work, my printer will work. And then there's a feeling from employees that when we go and put in a custom AV system, I need to get to the room 20 minutes early, I have to press buttons, I need to make sure it works, I need a person in the back of the room just in case to push the button because I forget what button to press, right? So I think the big difference is the criticality and the way in which the solutions are approached and delivered.
Just to add to that, it's quite interesting, listening to the question and the clues in the question in my eyes, which is no longer is the AV person and the IT person 2 different people. They're actually merging into the same person. And when you actually look at technology, that battleground of the desktop between the likes of Cisco, the likes of Microsoft, that's actually driving that unified individual into being 2 and 1 the same person. And it's all, you've heard it already on the panel, this is very much about affecting business outcomes and the impact on the day-to-day business. If you believe the stats that are put out by our industry body, you believe that the average meeting starts between 8 and 12 minutes late. Now, all of us in that room, there's no point having a straw poll because everyone in this room has been in a meeting that I bet you starts late. That's industry standard. In fact, at Microsoft, if you go into a meeting, they actually plan 60-minute content for a 90-minute meeting. That will give you an idea of where the challenges lie. And again, in answer to the question, we have to realise that we need to help these people, and I'm sure there's going to be a question in a minute, how we collectively as either manufacturers, suppliers, or indeed a global AV organisation like ourselves, actually help customers to drive that user adoption model, and I'll be covering that in a second because there's some interesting thoughts and processes and examples of how we actually do that, both from a end user community as well as a reseller community. So, you know, that's my thoughts on really where this is going. And this is a global thought process.
One more thing to add, maybe a couple things. You know, we talked about the convergence in this panel, about the convergence of AV and IT facilities as well. Back to the user experience, and we find really focusing on the user experience, it's about the convergence of having the same experience anywhere you are, whether it's mobile, desktop, or in the room. And traditionally, you know, desktop has been the world of IT, and they have a desktop and things that connect, and the room is facilities or IT. Now users just expect the same experience. And I think, you know, some organizations have melded the groups well and have IT groups with AV experience and vice versa, and some haven't. We have a customer, a big customer, a tech customer, that was very successful with Blue Jeans on the desktop. Desktop and mobile, it was great. Then they decided to, they had, you know, one big executive conference room that was set up and worked fine, although it was probably the 60% that, you know, could figure it out. They decided to install a bunch of our huddle rooms and got really mixed ratings on them. But really the feedback was, man, you know, like one touch to push, the user experience is good, but the audio on these things is just terrible. What's going on? We kept talking with IT. We finally went to visit the rooms, and they'd taken these USB speakers. They didn't like the look of it on the table, so they mounted them below the televisions, right? And the mics are on the side, you're hearing the fans below. And we talked to them saying, hey, this isn't actually the best place to put it. And the light came on for them saying, okay, we actually need to hire AV professionals as part of our group. They realized they were good at the IT side, but they weren't delivering on that end user experience. So, you know, I think the convergence is happening. Some groups are more enlightened than others, but a lot of it is because the convergence of the desktop experience has got to be the same experience as the room experience, and you need different people to get those to fit together.
Yeah, I want to add that it's different type of people, the IV and the IT people. The IT are more control freak, and it's in our organization like that, and I assume elsewhere as well. You can't do this, you can't do that, these are the rules you have to bind with. And from the AV people, they expect everything to work. So when you come up with a new device, it's supposed to work in the room. If you bring an older device, it's also supposed to work. But it's not the same when it comes to IT. So these are the framework that you are allowed to work. You cannot install anything you want. You cannot upgrade your OS without permission or pre-test. So it's a different kind of animal. Moving from a free environment, let's call it, okay, the hippies are the AV people that we are supposed to allow everything and make it enabled, versus the IT people who are very, very strict, very, very control freak, that forbid doing things. And this is also a culture thing that we need to understand and realize how to cope with.
Good point. And let me just add one more. You need to set the right level of expectation in the minds of your users. And I'll go back to an age-old story about video. If you say to your users you're going to put video in for them, they're used to a television and a telephone. Every time they turn their TV on, it works. Every time they pick up their phone, analog more than cell these days, they dial a call and it stays up until they hang up. We've never set a level of expectation with video in the telephone networks. They don't have 99.9% call completion for video calls. So as a result, you need to say to your end users, if you're getting 90 to 95% call completion, you're doing really well. They're used to the fact of cell phones nowadays that don't always work where we go. And they're used to the fact of PCs that crash or need rebooting or need replacing. So we have set that level of mediocrity a little lower now with the cell phones and the computers, and they can relate to that. You can say to them, this is more like your cell phone and your computer than your television or your telephone. We've never done that with users. So the users think of video in particular as their TV. And they know when they turn the TV on, they get the channel. That's not reality. You need to reset the level of expectations that video And these technologies are more like your cell phone and your computer. So let's move on a little and let's ask the panelists, and Danny, I'm going to ask you purposely to start first on this. What have you seen your customers are doing in the merger of AV and IT?
That's a really good question, and you know, as a global organisation that last year did projects in 101 countries, we are seeing a colossal, probably the fastest move in our industry. I've been in this industry for 25 years, and every year we get to the new year and people say it's the inflection point. We're going to move into video, we're going to move into unified communications and collaboration. I think this year and into next is the fastest time I've ever seen in terms of the user adoption model. And migrating into the digitization space. And what I've actually seen, the most successful companies, and this is a really interesting point for me and for everyone in the room hopefully, is the ones that are most successful in terms of deploying that migration from AV to IT are the ones that actually have a predefined and concrete user adoption model. And what I mean by that is we did a project with a global telecommunications company that had and deployed 1,200 endpoints. And for the first year, they were getting a user adoption rate of about 20 to 25%. So we actually sat with them and worked on a program that actually took away, and it was mentioned earlier in one of the summaries, we actually took away other technologies and worked on a program for user adoption which actually got them to a 90% user adoption rate within their organization. So in answer to the question, what are we seeing in that migration world? The companies that are most successful are the companies that deploy a rigid, long-term, not just a 3 or 4 week one-off training session, they actually deploy a complete and comprehensive user adoption program within their organization. There is a well-known technology uptake curve that if you deploy technology in your organization, you will see a 20 to 25% uptake, probably within the first 3 to 6 months. And then you actually see that uptake actually decline and you get back to a level of about 40% in an organisation. That is hardly compelling ROI to an organisation. So any organisation that is serious about deployment of technology, whether it's WebEx, whether it's VMR services, whether it's huddle rooms, whether it's video, it doesn't matter what it is, they need to deploy a comprehensive user adoption model. And setting that user adoption model with the customer in the pre-sale, part of the pre-sales program, is critical. In a lot of companies, a 65 to 70% user adoption rate is a compelling ROI. So we're seeing that as one of the fundamental rules and one of the fundamental parts of actually deploying technology and making it successful in an organization. Whether you're an end user or whether you're a reseller, it doesn't matter. You need to be getting to those sort of levels. And there are companies out there now, through ourselves, actually deploying this sort of user adoption model. That is critical for everybody that's on this panel, everybody that's in this room, whether you're a manufacturer, end user, or indeed a reseller, it's critical that you actually have a comprehensive user adoption model. And that's where all of us on this panel can actually help you.
Great. Who else would like to address that? Mark?
Sure. Well, build on that a little bit. So totally agree in terms of adoption and having a comprehensive adoption program. Most successful customers, the customers that start using early and keep using, and there's training and everything is onboarding is included in the systems. That said, something else we're seeing as well, that if users aren't onboarded, they'll pick up and use whatever else they want to use, right? The consumerization of IT is here. Every meeting we have with every company we visit talks about rogue IT. People are picking up all these different chat programs. If the video we have isn't working, they're going to get some sort of freemium thing, or they're going to use FaceTime or Skype or something else. So if there's not a consumer experience to the products that a company's supporting via IT and AV, users will choose their own product. So for us, it's less about AV and IT convergence than serving the customer from the bottom up with the end user experience, and serving IT from the tops down. And where that meets in the middle is sort of magic. So you got to provide a great end user experience. You have to have an experience that actually works with people, with the tools people use, because there will be rogue IT, there will be unsupported hardware, unsupported platforms. People will be using this stuff from home. They'll want to dial in from wherever they are. At the same time, it needs to work with their conference rooms what they have. So we're focusing a lot at Blue Jeans on making sure that we meet all the users where they are with our technologies, so that it works with what IT actually supports. So that marriage of supported and non-supported is interesting, because forcing to use people, forcing people to use just what IT provides is not the world we're in anymore.
The other thing you need to make sure you tell your users is their calls and experience are only as good as the weakest link. If the CEO decides they're going to get in the car and go on the highway because they can't get onto the call that they had scheduled, and they're driving past a truck, when their audio's up, you now are hearing that truck noise and your whole call has degraded. So you need to make sure the users understand any call they're on is only as good as the weakest link. Dave, you had something.
Yeah, I think, and there's 2 points to this. So there's what you have to look at from an end user adoption plan. So I totally agree on you have to have this architected out. You have to have this planned out for scale. So do I want to scale this rapidly, or do I want to scale this more rapidly? But it also, again, you're going to hear a lot from me where it comes back down to experience. We're finding that when you deliver the right experience, it's not a thing of forcing users to adopt. That's the big difference between what used to be AV and IT and what consumerization and workplace transformation has done, right? You deliver the right experience, it's going to be almost like a firestorm where people do it. We've seen this, wholeheartedly in companies we've gone into where they made the mistake of delivering to the C-suite first, which then they bring their whole staffs in, and the next thing you know, their management chain's going, I want that technology, right? If you make it right, and they make it easy, and it's intuitive, and it's natural to what they're doing, they ask you for the technology. You're not forcing it onto them. And then so you see a much more rapid adoption, right? How many people in here today wait until the last minute to upgrade your phone OS, right? Versus how many people, as soon as they see that little button, go, update, right? Why? Because it's simple. You don't lose your data. You don't do anything. You design the experience the right way and it happens. Now, you also have to design the right experience for that IT shop. You've got AV and IT merging together now. And you've got folks that are used to throwing technology out there and measuring things one way or another. A huge piece that we're seeing in this now is telemetry, right? How do you measure how people are using the technology? You don't have time to send people around to rooms and go, hey, is that room being used? What's happening here? What technology did they use? I dumped, $100,000 on technology in this room, but 5 people sat in there and just talked to each other. Is that a good ROI, right? So how do you measure how that room's being used? So it's very important that the technology you're putting in there has a way to report back to a central database, and that you, as an IT and AV team together, now can take a snapshot and say, I've got 4 people sitting in a 16-person room versus I've got 16 people sitting in a 4-person room. Or I did average of 4.5 presentations per day across all my collaboration spaces across my company. Or, unfortunately, like we found at Intel, after the first 9 months of deploying technology, we found out that in the first 1,900 rooms we had done, we spent over 500,000 hours doing presentations at Intel. I can't tell you if those were any good or really bad, but we, for the first time, had a way of measuring how many hours people spent presenting inside of Intel. So having that telemetry piece reporting back in is going to be huge when you merge teams together and having a measurable footprint. Because when we talk about ROI, when you walk in and say, these people are demanding, I want to go do the rooms twice as fast as before, when you can walk in with measurable data and ROI, it's huge for you to be able to walk in and go justify that experience.
Okay, but I have to tell you a story, and this is an honest story. A Fortune 30 company decided they would measure the usage of their rooms. They then decided that if rooms were being used 20 hours a month or more, they would keep the rooms. If they weren't, they were going to take them out and remove them. They turned off the lines to 3 rooms that were not being used 20 hours a month. Care to guess which 3 rooms they were? CEO, CFO, CIO. Why? Because they were traveling. And the CEO said in no uncertain terms, I don't care whether I use that room 1 hour a year or your 20 hours a month. If it served a purpose and allowed me to move the business forward, that was fine. Stop measuring how many hours people are using this technology. We don't measure how many hours they use their telephone or their computer. We're not going to measure how many hours they're using the room. So I just give you sort of a buyer beware on that one. You've got to be careful what you're measuring and what you do with that telemetry information. Mark?
No, back to the telemetry. It's something we've been instrumenting BlueJeans for more and more, and found that it's not just utilization, but it's about the customer experience. And how can you measure the customer experience? Do a survey after every meeting, good meeting, bad meeting. If you look and someone is constantly reporting bad meetings, is it the room? Is it the individual? Is it training, right? Looking at actually the stats of individual meetings. What does, audio and video look like? What's the jitter rate? What's the bit rate? And actually setting limits. So you know that if there's a problem, before people actually complain, let AV and IT know so they can do something about it. Being proactive and using that telemetry, not just to turn on or off rooms, but really to actually measure that customer experience. How quickly are people getting into meetings? What's the experience there? Yes, please.
When you actually look at we're slightly paralysed by the word analytics now in our industry, and that's what we're talking about up here. And I think you can have paralysis by analysis and you can overlook at analytics. So when you do actually take that analytic data, you need to make it meaningful for both you and your business. And I think that's kind of the general consensus. And it really is about user adoption, and it really is about how people actually use the technology in their business. And it will actually fund, with the right analytics, will actually fund better adoption, but more importantly, it will actually fund better investment in the organisation. And the common thread and the word that we all use now, everybody in this room, is about affecting business outcomes. We've all stolen that from Cisco, and good on them for coming up with that. Because every conversation we have is how does it impact on the business, whether it's a CEO who wants to use a meeting room for 1 hour a year, that still affects a business income, business outcomes, because it's affecting his business. And this is critical. So we have to be mindful of not overlooking at analytics, but making sure analytics, both from an AV and IT perspective, is actually utilised in the right way, used in the right way. It will drive adoption, and ultimately, it will drive business outcomes as a consequence of that.
No.
Yeah, I want to add. The reason analytics is very important is not just because the information is valuable. It's because that's the language that IT people understand. If you will try to talk with IT people about 4K 60, 444, or subsampling, they will throw you out of the door, right? This is something we know, and we shouldn't mention it before when we talk with IT people. We should mention data analytics, the big data. That's the new big thing in the internet, isn't it? What Google is doing with all of the data that they are collecting on us. So we start in a very low scale with the meeting spaces, huddle rooms, and we can monitor and provide these analytics to the IT people, again, to allow them have better control and to be able to justify the investment in those rooms. So again, we need to talk the same talk that they are used to, and not fill them with all of those tech terms of HTTP alliances and these kind of things. So analytics is important for the analytics itself, but that's the thing that they understand, and it's part of the big data, which is, in my opinion, the next big thing over the internet.
Okay, so let's go on and talk about the elephant in the room, which I get all the time from the users is, great, we're doing all of this, what do we do with security? How do we handle the issue of all the press we see about companies being cracked into and issues with security, and how am I secure and sure that the systems I've installed aren't going to be tainted and have caused problems for me? Michael, you want to start with that?
So that's something we at Crestron have thought about for, oh gosh, the last 10 years, right? Ever since we first put a LAN port on the back of a piece of AV equipment. And what we've realized is the people that are really buying this, it's going in the enterprise, it's going everywhere. And if you look at the challenges, and get back to the slides that Ann put up before, where she showed some of the hacking incidents, hackers don't go through the firewall, right? It's hard, it's hardened. They go for small, light, lean devices behind the firewall. Printers, phones, codec, AV devices. She also put up a slide that showed, one of everything goes into an AV system, and many people, especially folks that look at Crestron, say you guys are king of custom, right? You guys with a universal interface, you can buy any number of different widgets and glue them together. And we realize there are a lot of challenges with that. Part of the challenges are things like firmware, right? When there's a new malware or a vulnerability that gets released, now all of a sudden I have to start patching every single device. And oh, by the way, it's not good enough to say I'm only going to put one device on my network if I have other devices that are interconnected. They all communicate bidirectionally. Someone really smart gets their hand on any one of those devices, uses it for a launching off point to get into your network. So backing up, we built a complete ecosystem. So you can build an end-to-end system minus a display with our technology. all of the LAN ports are hardened. We have a team within Crestron that does nothing but focus on security and vulnerabilities and new problems and malware and things like that that get released. And so when you look at a LAN port, you know, we follow best practices that you'll see on the IT side of the world. Devices integrate with Active Directory. Why? Let's password people and not a box. Communications encrypted so that people can't see what's going on the wire between the devices. When we put something on the network, we use protocols to ensure that if I connected a touch screen to the LAN port in the lobby, that touch screen is still there, no one's removed it and changed it. And part of the problem is that a lot of the devices, when you walk through the show, not all, but a lot of them, they're not thinking about those concerns. They're saying, what do I need to do with a LAN port? Oh, let's grab some metrics from it. Or gee, I'd rather send a command to the device over IP rather than over serial. And the problem is that when you do that and you don't think about the rest of the environment that you're going to integrate into, you create a problem. The other thing, back to our ecosystem, I can update everything with one patch. And to go a step further, traditional methods, I would send a person to a room with a laptop to update some code or update firmware. That person is typically not bringing a network authorized computer, right? They're often not an employee. So one of the other things that we've been working on and for our enterprise clients philosophically, our vision is you should be doing firmware updates from servers that are hardened, almost like auto updates, except scheduled and controlled. You gotta start getting out of the world of, I'm gonna send a guy to a room or a gal to a room with their laptop, their mobile device, whatever it is. We have no idea what's running on it. They're gonna connect onto the device, right? They're gonna have at it. The other really important thing, and this really scares IT people, that wire, that network wire that brings you into the core of their world, there are clients of mine that will not allow that wire to be in a room that outsiders have access to. So if there's a public room for video conferencing, all the gear that touches the network is in a remote location. Again, the people that really want to do damage, they're not the folks that think, oh, if I hack into your box, I can raise and lower the shades. They're the people that say, I want to change the firmware on your device, I'm going to use a launching off point, and I'm going to go and do really bad things on your network. So for us, we built an ecosystem, we thought about how things are patched, we thought about how software and firmware is delivered, and we thought about hardening down all of those points. And why not use the roadmap that exists, that's accepted currently by the IT industry? And so that's the direction that we went, and it allows us to put our things into these environments. It's all great for the new stuff. The biggest challenge is the legacy devices, right? Because most of the people in the room that are end users, even if you start tomorrow implementing best practices, what do you do about the old stuff, right? And it's something that I would urge you to go back and look at and start to build a budget for, because leaving those older legacy spaces exposed ultimately can cause you great pain and challenges down the road.
As an example of that, many of you would have heard a couple of weeks ago that the British National Health Service had a colossal attack just to the point that has been made using Windows XP, you know, with a threat of 45 million patient records just on that basis. So I think that's a case in point. Only a few weeks ago, British Airways was down for a couple of days, saying it was a power outage, but we actually know that it was slightly different as a case in point, and that won't be raised. And much of this, when you actually look at security, the old age problem that people always believe is the argument, you know, for a manufacturer like Blue Jeans, is it a cloud-based service or is it an on-prem service? Well, you know, enterprise now, huge corporate Fortune 100 companies are now using cloud-based services. So to suggest that all the vulnerabilities are coming via cloud is actually poor press for cloud-based services. So I think this is right across the piece. I think we all have to be vigilant, but more importantly, there has to be a policy and a program. And that policy and program, as Crestron have already said, is true. It has to be a program that you need to upgrade, you need to be vigilant, you need to be on top of this. Because if you're not, you're going to have an NHS problem. And believe me, that could have been a lot worse than 3 or 4 days attack on 45,000 patient records.
This is a great way for you people to get the money you want to upgrade things. All you need to do is go into your senior management and say, this has happened at X, Y, and Z. We know how to solve the problem. Here's the money you need to give us to do it. Let me get Netta first, and then I'll come to you, Mark.
Okay, so security is a very, very wide term, and security, you treat security differently when it comes to different segments. So there is different security for websites, for healthcare systems, and for AV services. I'm coming from Kremer, as has been said at the beginning, and Kremer sits, the HQ sits in Israel. I guess that most of you know that Israel is a cybersecurity country, I'd say. We do lots of defense system as well as hack them at the same time. And so we have the capabilities, we have very, very talented people in Israel that are doing so. And when it refers to the video industry, I treat security in two different levels. One, which is the IT level. What do I mean? All of those devices that are connected to the network should be protected. There is never an end how much can you protect your system, but there is a standard. So the OWASP standard specify exactly what are the means to protect your device from being hacked. And our collaboration solutions are certified based on the OWASP industry, and this is something that's being used with the IT industry for many, many years now. And if we all comply with the same standards, it's very easy to measure and to compare. But the second part is the security of those AV systems, because we always talk about those IT and computer-related devices. But what about the HDMI cable? Do you think that an HDMI cable connected to the projector from my laptop is secured? Well, the answer is no. Because this projector has EDID, right? If I connect a direct HDMI cable from my laptop to this projector, I can modify the EDID. I can plan a software that will do something. Maybe it will sabotage the projector. Maybe it will allow me to hack the network through the projector, because the projector is connected to the network. So the innocent HDMI cable is not safe anymore. So you need to use isolators. So there are isolators with a higher level of security for DisplayPort, HDMI, as well as DVI, which detach the connection of those EDID. So only video stream can be transferred from one point to the other point without handshaking. Because as soon as I'm able to have a handshake, I can hack and break the other device. And by doing that, I can take control of the projector and maybe record the content. I don't know what. You know, it's up to the imagination of those hackers. So security, again, for the IT industry or the IT or the network devices, there is the OWASP. Very simple standards, you can comply or you're not. And for the regular video stuff that we're doing, VGA cables, HDMI cables, if you need that level of security, you have to use those isolators.
Mark, you wanted to make a comment.
Oh, just one thing to add, which is germane to both security and the convergence of AV and IT is BlueJeans, right? Traditionally a cloud company with a cloud service. It talks to desktop apps, which IT installs and controls. It talks to room systems, which AV and facilities develop. However, over the past year or so, we introduced huddle rooms, which we don't supply the hardware, but it works off-the-shelf hardware. It's a Windows 10 in kiosk mode for the that runs the software, and an iPad controller. And you can buy it in a box and ready to go and install it, or people can use their own hardware. And we've had different reactions from AV and IT. IT loves it because you've got this Windows 10 in kiosk mode, and they can put their own IT image on it, and they can manage it with their tools and the updating tools and the virus tools they already use. They can manage the iPad with the MDM tools they are using. So with IT, it's great. It's a great story. It's secure because they're using the same Windows 10 deployment they're using everywhere else. A lot of folks we talk to on the AV side say that's a nuisance. We don't want to install MDM. We don't want to have to deal with virus management and the like. We just want a codec that will plug in and update itself. So there's been a lot of kind of getting those two groups together, saying actually there's a lot of benefit to using the same software, the same updating tools, the same management tools for your AV deployment as you're using for your desktop deployment. But it's been an interesting road to walk because it's really been a different story on each side. On the AV side, we generally hear we prefer something that's more Kodak-like, more sort of, plug it and forget it. IT side says we want to manage it with the tools we already use. So that marriage is where we really see kind of that convergence of AV and IT and really needing to work together to make sure you can manage the rooms in the same way you manage your servers and desktops.
Dave?
Yeah, obviously Intel, we spent billions of dollars buying companies around security and stuff, right? And embedding those security technologies into our products. But I spent 17 years inside of IT as well, going through this whole merger of AV and IT. So I've lived this, I've done this. And the biggest thing I give around this, it goes very much to what a lot of these folks have said up here. But the one key thing I would say is when you're going to implement any solution, the first thing you should ask that provider that you're going through, whether it's a technology provider, whether it's an appliance provider, whether it's actual manufacturer, where's your safety and security data sheet, right? That's the first thing you should ask for. If they don't have a safety and security data sheet, you should run away, right? Because it's going to outline what ports, what protocol, what encryption methods, all this stuff, because you should be able to hand that into a security review committee inside your shop and say, here's the initial stuff. You shouldn't have to go dig that information up out of their product, right? And that's a very important thing, because that was my pet peeve. I can't tell you how many times when I was in IT, going through collaboration spaces and stuff, people would come in and go, hey, here's this great solution. I'm like, great. I need to go have a review with my AV and my IT teams. Can you hand me your, oh, well, it's all in the information right there. I'm like, no, right? You got to have all that out there, because if they're not showing it, it means they probably don't have it, number one. But number two, it has to be clearly called out. And then you've got to look at things. When you're even talking about encryption, they can say they have encryption, but what level of encryption, right? And then when you have the encryption, can I sign it with my own certs, or do I have to use your certs, right? Because these are all the questions you're going to get asked by different parts of your review process. So you've got to go through that and look through some of the stuff. And then the last piece is, don't go out and architect the whole solution around this and then turn features on that bypass that. And what I mean by that is there's lots of things like Michael talks about where you've gone through and we've hardened everything on the LAN ports and everything when you put it on your network. Oh, but here's this new feature we have where you can turn this on and we turn on an access point within your system. And oh, by the way, we're doing open broadcast, we're not doing encryption. Oh, where's your certification that you're not doing network bifurcation between that access point and the LAN port that's plugged in the back, right? I walked into a customer literally 2 months ago, and they're using one of those devices plugged into their network, and they're like, hey, well, it's gotten, they don't do any network sharing, and that's great. And I go, do you know this device, the version you're using right here, doesn't do encryption? So I could sit out in your parking lot and scan all your wireless traffic right now and see what's being broadcast in every one of your conference rooms. They freaked out. And I'm like, no, go on the website. It shows right here that only if you buy this solution do you actually get fully encrypted point-to-point traffic. So ask for that safety and security data sheet so it outlines everything completely, because otherwise you really don't know what you're implementing inside that environment.
Just one more quick point. So the other challenge that I find is just related to people. Seriously, because I go to meetings all the time, right? And I meet with the AV folks, and then I meet with the IT folks. Neither are an expert in the other's world, even if they work under the same umbrella. And because of that, neither wants the other one to know that they don't know something, right? And so what happens is the project gets planned and developed and engineered, and it's down the road, and people are installing it, and all of a sudden someone on the AV side goes to someone on the IT side and says, oh yeah, I have to stick this on the network, or I need IP addresses, or whatever it is, there's a blow up. And then there's a lot of friction. So my recommendation is very early on, before you even go to plan the project. If you're on the AV side, go talk to your colleagues and counterparts on the IT side. Understand the process. Go talk to the people in InfoSec. Ask them, what are the things that you guys look for? Or better yet, is there someone on your team that I can engage and bring into a meeting because we're thinking about doing something? Do you have a standard for switches? What do you guys support? What do you recommend? Because I'm going to need some network switches. And even if I buy them out of the AV budget, I don't want to manage them and you don't want me to manage them. Why don't we put them in your realm? So let me know what your spec is, right? We'll provide you what you need to be comfortable so that we all work together. And I will tell you that when that happens early on, harmonious. The other thing, ask advice and ask for help. So all of us sitting up here, right? We all have network engineers and people with different skill sets on our teams. And I know at Crestron, we're always helping. I got to imagine the folks to the left and right of me are happy to help as well. And so I often tell clients, especially on the AV side, listen, you want to move into this realm, you want to talk about tying scheduling into your video network. If you need to talk to an InfoSec person, you don't want to lead that discussion, we'll do it for you, right? Introduce us, and we'll take care of it, and we'll make sure that when everybody walks away, there's a high level of trust. because I'll bring people to the meeting that can talk the same language, right? Remember that. Sometimes we're talking two different languages. And some of the questions on the security side, while there are lots of acronyms, the questions are actually really simple. A lot of times they're yes, no, yes, yes kind of thing. And if you're asked a question, you don't know the answer, and you go on and on and on and on, the first thing that happens, the InfoSec person, their antennas go up, and you're going to be in a holding pattern for a while. So seek advice, make friends early, right? There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm not sure the best way to approach this. What do you think? Because it's going to live in your combined environment.
Great. So let me move on to one more question before I open it up to the audience. And it basically goes back to the whole title of this session. What's still not working in a post-convergence world of AV and IT? And Michael, I think you hit upon part of it with the lack of communication, but let's let all the panelists address that before we open it up to the audience. Mark, do you want to start?
Happy to. To me, a lot of it goes to the convergence of the rooms and the desktop, and the convergence of AV and IT, and the lack of communication. It has to work together. They're not separate islands. What has to work for the user needs to also work for IT, and that needs to come together, and AV needs to come together with IT as well. Going back to kind of what we're doing with huddle rooms. Again, when Blue Jeans was just a cloud company, and we stream from the cloud, whatever you get on the client side just works. That's really not the world we're in anymore. It's how does what we're streaming from the cloud work with the room? Because when everyone is getting the video feed from the cloud, they're getting it somewhere. They're getting it on a mobile device that's managed by an MDM system. They're getting it in a codec room, which is managed by one group. They're getting it on a desktop, which is managed by another group. So the coordination there and the communication is more important than it ever was before.
Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, it's very little to answer that, because I think it's something that the most important thing for any organisation to achieve those effective business outcomes is to make sure there's a discipline and there is a absolutely concise model of the technology they're actually going to use in any organisation. When I actually do a presentation on this subject, and I actually ask people what additional software from the cloud do they actually use in their organisation, and invariably people say none. And then I start putting up all the obvious, Salesforce and Google and everything else, and people start to realise how much additional usage is actually being used on their BYOD that people actually bring to their network every day. The most important thing is to have a concise, defined set of disciplines within the organisation, make sure it's adhered to, make sure there's a user adoption program, and there's every chance. We go to companies every single day globally that people have deployed technology that is a complete and utter mess because they don't have a disciplined platform and a disciplined structure. And the reason they don't get user adoption to the level is they don't have that platform. I think that's absolutely fundamental. And you've heard already on the panel setting security expectations right from the very beginning. Setting user adoption and setting user standards from the very beginning is also critical. And actually eliminating those additional technologies where you can actually join meetings and use meetings from different platforms. That is critical. So making sure that is an absolutely mandatory in an organisation will give you a greater chance. It's not the ultimate chance, but it'll give you a greater chance of success, coupled with a complete user adoption program. And that's not 3 months, that's invariably 6 months and longer, even into a year, an ongoing user adoption program. We're going to be around afterwards. If people want to hear and talk about user adoption methods and programs, then we're quite happy to sit and discuss that. But that, to me, would be the program of success. And use the phrase, what good looks like.
All right, so just to tack one more thing on to what these guys said and what I said before, I think you got to break the paradigm, right? The biggest challenge that I see when I go into a place with unhappy people or frustrated people is that the AV systems were designed around technologists. All of the conversations, the project team, they were all tech people. And the focus was on the plumbing. What do I mean by that? The AV manager, or whatever the title of the person is in the organization, is telling the designer, I want to connect my laptop here, and I want a cable TV in the room, and I want to have a camera on the front wall. What they're not doing, what they're missing, and while it's subtle, it's a huge difference in the outcome.
forget about the plumbing. Have a conversation with the real stakeholders, as Ann said, who are using the room, and then make the conversation in English and learn what the story is. What do I mean by the story? When I check into a Hilton, I know the process, right? I go online, I make my reservation. 24 hours before, I get an email that says, pick your room and say you want a digital key. I do all that. I show up, I walk in the door, I get in the elevator, I bypass the front desk, and I go to my room. I know how to use everything. Life is good, I'm happy. I don't care who made the lock. I don't care how it was programmed. I care about my end result. Why? Because I'm doing it to add efficiency to my life, people by technology, to increase the amount of throughput or capacity they can do on the business side. We need to start looking at AV and UC technology as tools to drive those efficiencies. Sure, it's great if we can fit in whatever particular widget you want, but the number one thing is the experience, the workflow, reduced risk, how do I keep things running, right? That's where the focus needs to be, and we need input and we need to understand the story from the stakeholders, not just the people that take care of the rooms.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'd like to call out is most of the stuff I'm still seeing happening is they plan for the known and not the unknown, right? I go and talk to customers all the time and it's like, well, we're architecting this, we have this known good footprint, it's this, 80% of my customers use Windows, 12% use a Mac, 8% other. I'm like, that's great, what about your guests, right? What are you going to do when a guest comes in? How do they connect? How do they do all this other stuff? So they plan and they architect for their existing footprint and not for, quote, the entire collaboration footprint. And I see that happening over and over again, and so that was the one thing I would call out that we still see that's happening, which is don't just assume it's the company you work for, the company you're doing, it's the whole thing. Who's going to interact? Even you as a provider, if you're a provider for somebody, you're part of that unknown footprint, right? So how? Ask the question, how are you going to support people that don't work for your organization when they come in? Because a lot of times you'll find out people aren't architected for that.
Okay, so I want to touch 3 points that I think are still the main reasons why AV and IT, there are lots of things that still doesn't work. I'm in the AV industry for 26 years now, so I do feel the same things that you are feeling, and I think it's different from what the IT are feeling, and I'm going to repeat things that were said here. First of all, the scale of things. If we're doing 10 meeting spaces or meeting rooms in a corporate, we're very, very happy and pleased. But the IT scale is thousands. So it's really different scale. We are pleased with one major installation in an auditorium, but it's only one. They talk about massive deployments. So the scale of things is different, something that we need to realize that they talk in a different language. We do still hesitate talking to the professional IT people. We don't know the acronyms, we don't know the terms, we don't know the way, the things that they are interested. Hesitation is still there, and as much as we learn, as much as we develop ourselves as AV people, we will have less and less hesitations talking to those IT people. And the last thing, we need to show them what they get from us. We can provide them the ROI, as we said, with the analytics and everything, but more of that, we can provide them quality. No one can argue quality. Putting 2 USB speakers under a TV in a meeting space is not good enough. So if we will design the right system that they can understand and use, they will appreciate the quality that we can provide them. They cannot get to the same quality by themselves. This is something that only we can give them, and that's our benefit. This is our advantage.
Good points. Now, before I open this up to the audience for questions, I have a question for all of you. We've got some great experts up here, and IMCCA has others. Would it be helpful to you if we published a couple of articles with some vignettes of experts? We've just done one this month in the IT AV report as part of Sound and Communications that addressed the user experience, i.e. the usage and adoption that Danny was talking about, and that addressed security. Would taking some of the comments these gentlemen have given, synthesizing them down in an article, be of use to you to be able to give back to your management and staff and people who aren't here today? Show of hands. Okay. Then as a board member of IMCCA and the chair of programming, I will step up to do that, and I will call upon these gentlemen if they're available, and if not, I will find some others within IMCCA who are to do that for you as a service to the organization.
Just to add to that, in London a couple of weeks ago, I hosted an IMCCA event with a a lot of consultants and a lot of end users. In fact, we had 72 people turn up to an end user event just to talk about this one subject. And we had 3 hours where we actually went through, the challenges in the industry, where AV is migrating or merging with IT, and we also discussed really where and how you actually get that user adoption model. That session was due to last 3 hours. It actually lasted 5 hours. Such was the interest and the demand in terms of how you actually get the deployment of technology and how do you actually... So I've said a lot about that today. So I think that the fact that that's been offered, everyone in this room, I would actually urge you to take that up. Firstly, join the IMCCA, that's number one, and then secondly, take the opportunity from the white papers, the videos, and this technology to actually use it. So I'd actually encourage everybody in the room to actually participate in that. That's actually number one. The other thing, just to finish off on the comments that were made earlier, our vocabulary in our industry is changing, and it's changing at an alarming pace. But it still comes to one fundamental business process, and that is how does it impact on their business, what is going to be the ROI, and ultimately what are we actually going to achieve from actually deploying this technology. And I think as long as we have that as a, in our minds as we leave this session, all the questions that are asked today, then I think this would have been a worthwhile session. So from us, thank you for listening for that.
Okay, let me open it up to the audience. I'm going to walk around with the mic. If you have a question for either the whole panel or a specific panelist, let me know. Okay? And if you'll just identify your name and who you're with, and then ask whomever you wish.
Gary Yarbrough, north of Berman, manager of media services, solutions, IT manager as well. One thing I think we was talking about, you guys was talking about communication between the IT and the AV people. It's one thing with communications, but it's also what I see is training. You got a situation and you send, and you must send the right person to do the right job. So if it's an IT situation that's going on, and especially if it's identified, it would be great to pull the hand of an AV person to come along to see how it's done. Like you were saying, there's no way in the world I can understand all the languages between the two. It took you a long time to get to this point with the AV world, and it took them a long time to get with the IT world. You're not going to learn it overnight. But with me and my experiences coming through, a lot of it is what I saw. People working, being involved or around that language and understanding it that way. So it's not, and I don't know it all either, especially on the IT side. AV, I can do what I need to do, but the IT world, like just coming into that world, it's different. And I need somebody who understands that to be with me if I'm trying to collaborate, or get somebody like our president in our company when something goes wrong. We can't say, well, if you're on a phone and the window's down, you need to wind the window up. No, that's not going to happen. Immediately, you're blamed for that failure on that call. We go through it all the time. And I'm pretty sure a lot of other people go through it. So yesterday's meeting was a word God brought up. He said it depends. And that word goes a long way with it. It depends on what happens and how you got to say this or present it to people who don't even want to push a button to make a phone call.
Let me tell you a quick story as to why I think it's very important we set level of expectations, because I understand where you're coming from with the issue of saying to the CEO, roll the window up. And I'll identify the actual company. It was General Motors. General Motors was having great difficulty with their President's Council meetings. The calls were glitching, going down, reports, troubles all the time. So I was called in to work with General Motors. And I'll make a very long story short. I asked if I could sit in on one of the President's Council meetings. And the first reaction was, oh, no, they're President's Council meetings. I said, look, tell them to talk about the weather. I don't care what they talk about, but I need to see what's going on. The bottom line that happened was that when there was a problem in the meeting, they all had a support person. When there was one problem, we got 12 calls to the help desk for the one problem. Nobody had instructed them that at the meeting, whoever, and whatever rule they wanted to make, whoever called the meeting, it would be that tech person to call in the problem. To go further with it, One of the questions I asked was, who trained the presidents and the president's councils how to use the facility and what the process was? And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, somebody had to give them guidelines, some sort of information. And my answer that I received was, oh no, they're the presidents. They know everything. You have got, and this is the God's honest truth that happened. The minute we provided them minimal education, a process to follow, 3 steps, those problems all went away. So the reason I raised the point is everybody needs to have some level of expectation and has to understand what will and won't work. Television has been a big negative to a lot of us in that people see things done on TV shows you can't physically do. And people come in the next day and say, I want what I just saw on NCIS to happen in my room. That doesn't work, that's TV. Not physically possible. Yes, I know you saw the Jetsons when you were growing up. We're not there with all of it yet. So I make that point before I'll let the panel make a point on this one, but thank you.
You need to put that statement in that magazine.
Oh, I can put that statement in the magazine. I've written it in articles before. I'll do that. I'll add that to the article.
Can I, firstly, your question was superb, and thank you for asking that question. Secondly, fantastic muscles. I've got muscle envy. In answer to your question, I'll be slightly biased from my own organisation here with offices in 45 locations around the world, 1,800 employees. Our value to the organisations, whether end users or indeed customers or partners, is the fact that we have all our engineers and CSEs are trained to a certain level. So when someone actually turns up at your building to actually install, support or maintain something, they are able to cross over between the AV and the IT space, and I think that's really important. I think your suggestion and idea for you to actually see and watch, I don't think I'm going to find a better suggestion this week at Infocom in terms of maybe even deploying that in our own organisation to actually give customers more comfort to see the sort of projects, how we install them, what happens when we have an issue or challenge. And I think for everybody in this room to actually understand, not just fixing the issue, but understand how we get to that problem, how we fix that issue and actually move it forward, I think is a really important thing. I think it's a great question. Well, thank you for asking it.
Other comments before I go on to the next question? If not, don't worry about it. We'll go to the next question.
I will just add one quick comment. I agree with you. We found out as we do deployments across different rooms, different devices, etc., that as we're coming in as a third-party vendor, we actually specifically ask, say, hey, here's the people that need to be a part of the conversation, be in the room. Because if we just have the conversation with IT, they're not asking a bunch of the right questions. If we just invite AV, they're not asking the right questions. So we as a vendor coming in say, hey, ideally, here's the right people to get in the room and have the conversation. But here's the business outcome, here's what needs to happen on both sides. So totally agree, having those two together is really important, and being deliberate about getting those people in the room is really important as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nate Schneider with ImageStream Medical, and I'm a system designer. The term end user, actually, what was the term? I have it in my notes here. I just lost my place. User adoption program was used. I think I'll direct this to Danny. Can you talk about the major components of a successful user adoption program? What are like the key things that you really need to have? Because earlier the question was asked, how many people have walked into a room and seen a laminate sheet that says, here's how you use the room? That, to me, the way I'm thinking about this, seems like a botched user adoption program. It was somebody thought through to, okay, they need this information, but I'll just leave it on a sheet on the table. So is that accurate also to,
If we go into a room and there's laminated sheets on a table, we've collectively failed in terms of a user adoption program. The user adoption program absolutely needs sponsorship, sponsorship, and sponsorship. It's a program that will last depending on what the collective outcomes need to be. We actually work on a program, what we call fee for value, which means we could come into your organisation for say 6 months and not charge you a single penny or a single dime, remember where I am, a single dime for actually doing that program. But we actually sit down at the very beginning of a user adoption program and we put together a success model. What would you as an organisation perceive to be a success model? And it might be, we see a success model with 60% of our people, 70% of our people using the technology as their de facto go-to day-to-day standard. If we agree that it's a successful model, we'd actually work with you on training and the programs to actually get to that user model. We actually work with the world's biggest telecommunications company, and they had a video estate of 1,200 units around the world, and they had 27%. When we left them, they had 92% user adoption on day-to-day. So without going through the intimate modules of that, it needs sponsorship, it needs a program of adoption, it needs to eliminate other technologies that will get in the way of that, and it needs to be mandatory in the organisation. And there are programs, again, against that fee-for-value model that are very, very successful. And this, as I said at the beginning of what I said a few minutes ago, has to be a fundamental part of the sales process. So when we collectively sell you products or technology, it has to be a fundamental part of not just buying, deploying, and then supporting that technology. It's how then we get our collective end users to use that technology. If you're buying solutions from any manufacturer and they're not offering you a user adoption program in some shape or form, then I believe they're selling you short in terms of having you as a sticky, repeatable customer that you add true value to.
Let me add one point to that, because it's part of probably 60% of our business. We start by saying to the customer, what's your benchmark for success? And when they look glassy-eyed at us and say, what the heck are you talking about? Why are you installing, upgrading, doing X with these technologies? What do you hope to accomplish? So we start with that level. We get a team of people from that organization so that they're singing Kumbaya, from the AV, facilities, IT, together, sometimes kicking and screaming. But remember, there's something to be said, and it's one of the reasons I got into consulting. When you bring an independent third party in, for whatever reason, management listens to it. I got into consulting because I worked for the Bell system. I did a very major project for them. When I was done, they said to me, we're now hiring McKinsey or Bruce Allen to come in and do the same project. I said, why? They said, it's a sanity check. I said, the one who's insane is me. I'm leaving if you're going to keep doing that. So you need to put teams of people together who should be working together and may come to the meeting kicking and screaming to start with what's my benchmark for success. Then I would add on to what Danny's talking about. Usage and adoption has to be different things to different people. Because you have to remember, some people learn visually, some people learn by reading, and you have to be constant and ongoing with it. So we do it as a combination of marketing and promotions and training and education. And the difference between training and education, I can train you to touch a button. I need to educate you on why you should touch that button. So I want to spend time developing applications, talking about benefits, talking about the way people work, so that I'm going to take that technology and impact the way they're working. Michael?
Yeah, just to tack on to it, and you stole some of my words, which make me feel good because it means I'm not insane, but marketing is a major piece to this. And when I started working with clients who, their install base is a minimum of 1,000 rooms, when they're developing standards and going through that whole process, one of the bullet items that came up on the project plan, was marketing, and the delivery of a whole campaign, including videos and things like that, to appeal to their user community. Because the belief was that if they develop the right solution and they market it in the right way, people will just call up and request that instead of trying to recreate the wheel. And you know what? When you develop the right solution and you market it and show it off in the right way, people buy in, right? And it really helps the success of that project and that deployment grow across the enterprise.
And let me add to his marketing with another story. Many years ago, Hilton Hotels did a joint venture with AT&T, where they equipped conference rooms in Hilton hotels across the United States with video conferencing. That meant you, as a guest at the hotel, could go use the facility, or if you happened to be in a location outside the hotel and wanted to rent it, you could. So I decided to do a test, and I took half a dozen Hilton hotels that I walked into the front desk and said, I'm here to do a meeting with your video conferencing room. Not one knew they had it. No marketing had been done. No marketing had been done to the internal Hilton staff. So that when somebody contacted them to say, I just saw your advertisement with AT&T about having these rooms, I'd like to use them, they were having all these people walk in and been told there weren't any rooms, they knew nothing about them. So marketing is extremely important. And for these technologies we're talking about, it doesn't have to be expensive. And it can be things as simple as an email notification, a tweet, a text. Things that are just making people aware of things that either are new and existing or to improve ways they're doing things. But there has to be a plan in place. Okay, next question. I'll do you first, but I'll come back to you next. Name and your business.
John Watson with KLA Labs. So I'm a systems integrator, and going along with that language barrier between IT and AV, in a lot of projects I've seen where me from the AV side, we're trying to learn the IT language, and then we get kind of a kickback from like companies' IT department where they don't want to learn anything about AV. And so trying to work with them, have you come up with anything in your experience to help kind of bridge even when they don't really want to learn anything about the AV side?
Number one, you're not going to force them to learn if they don't want to learn, so don't bother. Talk to them in simple English, right? Don't get to, first of all, the discussion is not technical. The discussion is purely about goals, outcomes, success, what are people, how do people work, what are they trying to accomplish? That's one major bucket of conversation. The second major bucket is the one that they speak. It's going to go on the network. We have to think about security. What are your processes? What are your practices? They can have that discussion with you all day long. They don't care about the nitty-gritty of the projector and how you make the sausage, so to speak, right? Stay out of that world. Talk about the user experience, talk about impact on the users, talk about how they want to maintain the rooms, talk about expectations, make sure that you meet their needs on the security side. Either you can further educate yourself. There's lots of places to learn about the IT side of it. There are a lot of people that you can bring in as third-party consultants to help you in that aspect of it so that you instill comfort. Stay out of the technical realm. Take the technical part of your AV discussion and put it into very simple language that's easy to digest, even if you're making analogies that don't have to do with the technology. I would tell you that would be far better, and you will get to a positive end result much quicker than if you try to force them to understand your science.
I was only going to answer that, which everyone else would have added to, I guess, on this panel, which is do not force those two areas together. They're employing you because you're the expert, so therefore remain the expert and don't try and force the two together. Absolutely agree with that 100%.
So I want to add, and I'm not going to be popular by saying that. We need to be trained and educated for IT. So we in Kramer, we're doing lots of training worldwide, trying to educate people towards the IT, but it's too little and it's not enough. And I hate to say, but you guys have to take responsibility and train yourself in various ways. Do not expect the restaurants, the Kremers or the other vendors in the industry will teach you and provide you all the tools you need to be able to talk with an IT professional. You have to train yourself, take care of yourself, otherwise, I hate to say it, but you're going to be obsolete. So it's everyone's responsibility to train himself to a certain level that he feels confident to be able to have this kind of talks.
My name is Steve. I'm with a large college up in Toronto. Question is, where do you see the convergence of IT and AV in 5 years, both from a product perspective and also from an organizational or role perspective?
That's a brilliant question. I'm glad we're probably going to end on that question.
We are, and you can each address it.
And if I may just go first, I see it in probably even 3 years' time. I see the majority of our industry based on as-a-service model. I actually see the fact that much of what we provide will be services driven. So in terms of the consumption model, you will take it as a service. So whether it's in the cloud or on-prem, but it will be predominantly as a service. And I see that, we're talking about business outcomes here, and the common theme through today has not been talking about the technology. If the technology gets in the way, then really we have a problem. And I think we all kind of agree with that. So I certainly see as a service, and I see the fact that our consumption model For the first time in our industry, we have consumer driving enterprise, which effectively means the majority of people, I think the last survey from Gartner was 54% of people believe they have better technology at home than they do in the enterprise and in the workspace. And we're going to see that continue, I think, in some ways. Industry has to catch up, and it will catch up by not owning anything. And it will be a migration from a CapEx model to an OpEx model, as you see the as a service. We all have to get used to that in this room, and we all need to understand that that's the way that we'll consume technology going forward, and that's the way we will do it in our private lives as well as our professional and business lives.
Totally agree with the services, moving to services. I also think all these services, it's all going to be a consumerized model, right? More and more when I talk with IT and AV, it's about there being organizations to serve the customers. I think inside organizations, AV and IT groups are going to be competing with outside service models in terms of who can serve the customer better. So it's going to be focused on who can have the best customer experience. It's going to be a heterogeneous world where people are choosing various services from inside and outside the organization, and it's going to be a race to who can provide the best services to the end user.
I would agree with that as well. However, I would also very strongly say that this industry is not going to be taken over by the IT industry. And right now, there's a lot of focus on the network and security and how we talk to devices and all that. Ann put up a slide that showed off-the-shelf solutions. They are starting to ramp up and get very popular. The very next thing you're going to notice is that there are solutions that were designed and delivered by IT people, and they do a great job at connecting to the network, and they don't do such a great job at addressing the specific rooms. So I think you're going to start to see a huge importance come back to critical areas of space. We need to understand the room, acoustics, physics. We need to make sure that the right things go in the right places, and the IT guys can't do that. So there'll be a blending. I think that there'll be a much greater or more equal respect amongst colleagues in that world, but I think that what has happened in the traditional AV space, as it relates to the room, not the equipment rack, is going to become amplified and become a lot more important. I think the aspects of what lived in the equipment rack with one of everything are going to be diminished.
So I think there's like 3 areas here that, I mean, my team, we've been doing a lot of research on this probably for the last 2.5, 3 years. And so one of the big things we haven't really talked about up here today is workplace transformation. And so we've talked a lot today about rooms, but really in 3 to 5 years, it's not about rooms. You're still going to have your C-level suites, you're still going to have your executive briefing centers, you're still going to have these types of things, but it's really about collab spaces, right? And it's going to be, when you look through how some of these companies have already gone through workplace transformation, it's all about, it's open floor collab, it's huddle spaces, it's all these different types of things. And so that's where you see a huge change coming. And so different types of technology, that's number one. I mean, you're talking people being able to walk down a hall and see a 50-inch digital display that's being used for digital signage that all of a sudden you need for instant collaboration as well, because I don't want to show you on a 7-inch screen in my pocket. I want to take over that screen, show it to you for a minute, and then walk on. So it needs to be able to be dual purpose. So you see a lot of these usage models emerging that's really changing a lot of that. The second piece is no siloed environments. There's going to be a lot of companies that come in and talk to you about we're the one size fits all, we can answer all your solution needs. You shouldn't have to do that. As an IT shop, you're going to have different ecosystems, different partners. As an AV shop, same thing. You're going to have rooms that you want everything from a biamp mic array up in the ceiling to a very secure, hardened security system, because we're going to be talking C-level suite stuff in there. So you need to pick solutions that integrate well with other people. And not just you have to buy all my stuff to be able to do that. They have to work with other partners in the industry so you can go out and pick the things that are best for your environment. So these are some of the key things we see changing over that space, is that there's going to be a lot more open stack stuff, a lot more pieces and parts that you can put together between different partners, so you can pick who you want to work with on the different pieces together and deliver the right solution along the way. But then the big piece is don't just assume rooms. You've got to look at how these models are changing. Just go to some of the modern universities today. Watch how their libraries transform. Watch how their student unions transform. Why? Because people are working differently. And that's going to be a huge footprint inside the corporate space in the next coming years, right? So you've got to look at where those people are coming from, coming into the environment, study those people. And we do a lot of study around UI and how people are coming into this environment. And that's what you've got to look at for that transformative step.
So I do agree with most of the things that were said here. The way I see it, I can't tell you if it's going to be 5 years or 10 years, but I do believe that the AV industry will be taken over by IT, just like it happens to the telephony. Do you see any regular telephone lines working today? I don't think so. Telephony was even a bigger industry than the AV, and it was taken over by IT. And even now, if you go to the show floor, you know, I know that we in Bremer already have many of our offering products are based on different types of PCs, either Linux-based, Windows-based, or even different types of Raspberry Pi. So I do believe that the common appliance will be a PC, okay? PC is something that the IT industry are very, very aware of, okay? They can manage it. And as I was said at the beginning, it's all about services. What we can put on this PC, what kind of services we can offer them. And that's the way I think the industry is going. I don't know if it's going to take 5 years, as you said, or more or less, but the way I see it, you know, that's where things are going.
We are out of time, I'm sorry to say. I think we could continue this for quite some more time. We will do a panel similar to this in Las Vegas next year. I want to take the time for all of you to thank our panelists. I think we had a great group this morning, and thank you for being here.